We all know that Hillary Clinton is very rich. Last year, she made $10 million. Over the last decade, hundreds of millions. We also know that Hillary Clinton wants to raise trillions of dollars in new taxes on people just like her. Yet, it's the Clintons who hide their income. It's the Clintons who avoid paying taxes more than anyone else. Let's take a look. First, the Clintons have set up a trust for their million-dollar mansions so they can avoid the death tax. Second of all, they have set up 5 different companies as shell companies in Delaware so that they can avoid paying taxes on income they receive. Those companies share an address with 208,000 different companies across the country. Third, the Clinton Foundation. A watchdog has deemed it the slush fund for the Clintons, where they use it to pay for swanky office space, first-class travel, and to pay off their political friends. When it comes to raising taxes on the rich, the Clintons don't want to pay those taxes. Hypocrite? I think so.
Our next guest is a known whistleblower, a financial analyst who's exposed some of the largest corporations in our nation for financial discrepancies, and that's putting it nicely. This man was responsible for exposing General Electric, AIG, and now he's aiming higher, alleging a bombshell analysis, charity fraud, he describes it, at the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. Take a look.
Everywhere in the world where there is real progress, you find creative networks of cooperation. The non-governmental organization is the instrument through which people of goodwill and passion can change the course of the future. And you cannot refuse to do anything just because you can't do everything. We're all citizens of this world. Let's build a better future together.
Joining me now is Wall Street analyst Charles Ortel. Charles, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Liz. Appreciate it.
All right, sir. This is not the first time that you've uncovered financial discrepancies. You had General Electric, you had AIG. Now you say you found some cash flow discrepancies with the Clinton Foundation. Tell us, what did you find?
Well, all public charities, and that's what the Clinton Foundation started out as being. It started out being simply a library and archive based in Little Rock, and that was its sole tax-exempt purpose. All public charities whose revenues exceed a certain number, it depends state by state, have to provide each year an independent certified set of financial statements that is called a professional audit. The Clinton Foundation, since inception on October 23, 1997, has tendered into the public domain documents that purport to be audits, but they're not audits. They're not compliant with the actual tough regulations that exist in places like your state, California, my state, New York, and around the world. And when you start pulling beneath the surface and looking at the actual financial statements and cross-checking them, these financial statements can readily be cross-checked. There shouldn't be discrepancies. They can be cross-checked for the foundation alone, and they can be cross-checked for their disclosures against the disclosures of charities that say they gave amounts to the Clinton Foundation. For the last 15 months, I've been doing that type of painstaking work, and the discrepancies and the numbers that we see run in the many hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay, well, let me ask you this first before we even get into the nitty-gritty of the independent audits and what laws they might be breaking there. How do you know? You say you've been analyzing this for 15 months. What kind of access to records do you have, and what records are you looking at to determine this?
All right. Well, that's a good question. So the starting place for the Clinton Foundation, for the people who don't know better, is to look at their own website. And there they put up information, financial reports that go back to 1998, but audits that start in 2004. So in the beginning, there's a bunch of missing information. The versions that they put up on their website are very different, materially different from the versions that you can find by looking in the states where they have operated inside the United States and outside the United States in online databases that are freely accessible. The second thing you can cross-check are press releases issued by the Clinton Foundation and others at the time that these major donations and grants are made. The third thing you can check, which I've checked, are after-action audit reports. The big governments that give money away have had troubles. So, for example, the government of Norway, the government of Australia, the government of Canada, the government of Ireland, the government of the UK. Each of these organizations and multilateral organizations will do special reports on a country, the progress in a country, and they contain extensive reports that don't foot. But the biggest place to start is with the largest donor. And the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation is a name very few people know. It's called Unitaid. Out of the $2 billion in declared contributions, which may or may not, and most likely are not the total amount of money sent towards the Clinton Foundation, of that $2 billion, $600 million came from one organization based in Switzerland.
All right, so this lack of independent audits then that the Clinton Foundation almost fudged to make it look like they did conduct. If they didn't conduct them, as you've found, what laws does this violate? Does that violate local law, state law, federal law, charity law? What does that violate?
All right, the principal law that it violates is charity fraud solicitation law. This is a charity that, while we're on this broadcast, is raising money over the internet. It may be using the phones to do it. It may be using the mails. And it's doing this broadly to the public. So when you engage in that type of behavior, your forms, all your filings have to be true and accurate. There's special laws that apply to charities. Charities may not engage in, quote, any illegal activity. So all these forms have to be accurate. They are not accurate. They are raising money. And worse, they are engaged in disaster relief. After the various disasters, 9/11, Katrina, and the frauds that happen, Americans and others are very generous people. We see a disaster, money flows towards a charity. After disasters were exposed starting in 2001, the federal government tightened the sentencing guidelines, the FBI did, for disaster relief charity fraud. And these people are engaged in disaster relief charity fraud. So the penalties for that, and mind you, it's not like Peter Schweitzer's book. You don't have to prove quid pro quo. All you have to show is they are soliciting, which they admit, and that their forms and filings are materially false and misleading, which I believe they are.
So you consider this to be charity fraud then?
Absolutely. It is an epic charity fraud. And what I would say is it's much bigger than $2 billion. Bill Clinton and others around Bill Clinton have been associated with related charities, and they should have been disclosing their related charity involvements. They haven't been. One of them is the American India Foundation. That, I believe, is a $1 billion fraud. There's the operation in Haiti. That's about a $12 to a $13 billion fraud. There's the operation called the Global Fund, which is in the many tens of billions of dollars of fraud involving disgraced convicted felon Rajat Gupta, former head of McKinsey. That's something that started in 2000, I think, 2 or 3. The piece of the Clinton Foundation that Bill takes a lot of credit for, and Hillary and Chelsea, distributing HIV/AIDS medicines around the world, that's a fraud. And there are serious questions about whether the medicines that have been delivered around the world are actually genuine and lawfully produced and effective medicines, or whether they may have been adulterated. I mean, there are very serious questions about this fraud that have been raised by some for years, but only recently, and really in the last 15 months, have I decided to take this kind of effort, because I've done the type of painstaking work. I've approached government authorities last year, several of them, and nothing has happened yet. So I decided, enough is enough. People are being harmed here. The public has a right to know about this, and the public needs to rise up and shut this thing down.
Right, why not? Why do these government officials ignore this? Because it sounds to me like this is a smoking gun story. This is uncovering an enormous case of charity fraud. It seems to warrant an investigation, if nothing else. Is this a Justice Department matter?
No, you see, for charity fraud, the ways in which charity frauds generally start out getting disciplined at state level. And the states that have the highest income tax rates tend to be, with some exceptions, controlled by Democrats. Even if the states are controlled by Republicans, the regulatory apparatus very frequently is influenced by Democrats. So the state apparatuses so far have not risen up and done their job. The federal IRS, I mean, after all, the IRS chief right now, the House is trying to justifiably impeach him. We know what Lois Lerner did. She ran the department, or it's alleged that she did. She ran the department that oversees charities federally. And foreign governments are shy to take this on because they reason that if the U.S. isn't going to take it on, why should they?
All right, so you said that this is a report in progress, that you have up to 40 reports to make on this. What else do you have? What's more to come?
Well, what I've done, I've actually already on my site, which is www.charlesortel.com, and if you Google me and Clinton Foundation, I've already written extensively about core elements of the fraud. But what I'm doing in these 40 reports is going chronologically, starting from the first moments when this thing operated, October 23rd, 1997. I'm going to take people on a painstakingly detailed journey through the chronology of this charity so that you see what I see. All of this is in the public domain. I'm mindful of the fact that many Americans and many people, even detail-oriented people, don't have the patience to go through hundreds and hundreds of pages of tables and charts and footnotes and links and things like that. So that's why I chopped it into 40 more easily digestible bites. I'm going to begin the first exhibit shortly. Is just simply going to deal with the early years when Bill was still President of the United States, when he still effectively controlled the executive branch, and show you the early years and where the frauds actually started. Because this thing, which was supposed to be, in my view, or said it was going to be a library, immediately was used, again, in my view, as a political fundraising machine to pay off Bill and Hillary's legal bills and also to set Hillary up for her Senate seat. That's what we're going to cover in the first exhibit.
All right, and for those of us, like you said, those of us, me and my viewers, who may not be able to go through all the painstaking details of the last 15 months that you have, can you give us any hints of what's more to come? Anything that the media and American people, even those who aren't necessarily interested in politics, are going to stop? They're going to say, wow, that is incredible. We can't elect this woman to be president, and this warrants investigation because it is outrageous.
Well, I would say that the last time that Hillary ran for president in 2007 and 2008 was perhaps one example of a very egregious episode where over $100 million was diverted from the Clinton Foundation in that period, from monies that this Geneva-based organization sent towards the Clinton Foundation in that period. And on its books, which are publicly available, on Unitaid's public books, it clearly shows that they sent about $100 million more towards the Clinton Foundation than the Clinton Foundation claims it received. In that period, major Democrat Party figures were on the board, and they didn't do their work. Another thing that might shock people is that Bill Clinton himself, though he has talked endlessly about this being his foundation, was not a named trustee or executive of any part of the foundation until December 31st, 2009, and not a trustee of the main one until sometime in 2013. Nevertheless, in September 2007, he published a book called Giving, in which he brags about all of his work, calls it his foundation extensively, yet doesn't point out to the public that he earned more than $6 million writing that book about charity and pocketed about $5 million for himself. That is something that absolutely had to be disclosed in the books,
right,
and is twice as big an affront to those of us who care about charities as what was in the Wall Street Journal last week.
Right, that is unbelievable. Charles, I hope you'll come back. Keep us updated on this story as it unfolds, because it sounds like you've got some good stuff to come. Good work on this, and I'll talk to you again soon.
208,000 different companies across the country. Third, the Clinton Foundation. A watchdog has deemed it the slush fund for the Clintons, where they use it to pay for swanky office space, first-class travel, and to pay off their political friends. When it comes to raising taxes on the rich, the Clintons don't want to pay those taxes. Hypocrite Clintons who avoid paying taxes more than anyone else. Let's take a look. First, the Clintons have set up a trust for their $1 million mansions so they can avoid the death tax. Second of all, they have set up 5 different companies as shell companies in Delaware so that they can avoid paying taxes on income they receive. Those companies share an address with
Electric, AIG, and now he's aiming higher, alleging a bombshell analysis, charity fraud, he describes it, at the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. Take a look.
Everywhere in the world where there is real progress, you find creative networks of cooperation. The non-governmental.
We all know that Hillary Clinton is very rich. Last year, she made $10 million. Over the last decade, hundreds of millions. We also know that Hillary Clinton wants to raise trillions in dollars in new taxes on people just like her. Yet, it's the Clintons who hide their income. It's the I think so.
Our next guest is a known whistleblower, a financial analyst who's exposed some of the largest corporations in our nation for financial discrepancies, and that's putting it nicely. This man was responsible for exposing General